We're going to start off with our first speakers. So Jamie and Michelle, come on up.
What could be more important than passionately following your heart? I mean, really think about it. What could be more important for you than passionately following your dreams?
Nothing, huh? Or at least not much. Yet most people's experience is that they spend a lot of their time not passionately following their heart. And it starts when we're young. Maybe you were in middle school or high school and you were hanging out with a group of kids that you knew weren't really your friends, but you hung out with them anyway because you wanted to hang out with the cool kids, or you were afraid to let yourself really shine through. Or later you found yourself in a relationship that your gut just told you was off, but you hung in there anyway because you were seeking love and approval from somebody else rather than from within you. Or you stayed in that marriage long after it was over for the sake of the kids, or you were afraid to disappoint someone. Or what about that job that you were so excited about, or that business that you were super keen on starting, but you know, the one you had already paid really well and the benefits were good and the other was a little bit risky, so you stayed where you were at. Whatever the situation may have been for you, it's not to say that the thing that was more important for you at the time shouldn't have been. I mean, obviously it was, and there's a time and a place for that. Yet, take a step back and have a 30,000-foot view of your life and imagine what it would be like if day in and day out and year after year, you let your passions run your life.
The interesting thing about this story is I haven't made it at all. I'm simply right in the middle of it. So it was the summer of 2008, and I was living the dream, or so it seemed. Had a beautiful house, amazing community and family, fantastic business, made plenty of money, and yet I was always looking over my shoulder like the grass, it was always greener. It was a chance encounter on a whitewater rafting trip that led us to Bend. And while we were visiting, we found an outward bound school, a charter school for middle schoolers. And we'd spent the last couple years in Philadelphia looking for alternative schooling. The public schooling wasn't working for us, and we really were looking for a change, and we had exhausted our search. So I put the application on the kitchen table. I wake up the next morning, and my 11-year-old daughter in her jammies shows up with the application filled out and looks at me and says, I went on the website, it looks amazing. I want to try and get in. I could really use a change. Talk about following your heart. I'm like, awesome, let's give it a go. 4 months later, hundreds of applicants later, a chance lottery of 20 kids, we get in. I remember the director calls and says, are you guys moving to Bend? Because we have like a really long wait list. I'm like, yeah, we're moving to Bend. Awesome. Okay, so by a show of hands, how many of you remember the financial crisis in the fall of 2008 in this country? Awesome. So we are driving out to Bend, and the stock market crashes. So literally overnight, by the time we arrived, we had lost half our life savings. Our house in Pennsylvania no longer became sellable. And my job that was virtual, that I could take anywhere around the country, literally went into the toilet overnight. Did I mention that my husband's a builder? The rubber had truly met the road. So what do you do? What do you do when all the tangibles, all the strikes are against you, and it seems like it's just not right, but in here, it just feels so right. My heart just kept saying, yes, yes. So we figure we're here for a year, we're gonna give it a go. I get to see, is the grass truly greener? You know, does alternative schooling really make a difference? Is this the right fit for our family? And then my marriage of 15 years that had been really struggling, can this pivotal move make it work? Phew. A couple months later, all that changed, and I met Michelle.
And I had no idea how connected Jamie and I already were. I got married in June of 2005, and we shortly after packed up our whole house and everything in it. We sold our house, sold everything in it, and took off for a couple years around the world. We had our backpack and a passport. And we started in Cairo, Egypt, learning Arabic. And I found myself in a world that I barely understood, if at all. And yet I wasn't particularly slow to judge it at the time either. What I did understand was that there was something in my heart just calling me to help, and especially the little kids. So what we learned from living in Egypt is that the people that could speak English had a significant advantage over those who couldn't, just because the tourism industry is so big. And then obviously the kids that had money could afford English lessons, and those that couldn't didn't. So we started a school for orphan kids to learn English. And every day, these kids from different orphanages across Cairo would load up onto these buses that were so crowded and smelly, and they would go across Cairo inhaling the smog that was so thick, truly when you blew your nose it just turned out black. And they would arrive at the school completely untouched. Their eyes were so big and so bright, and they were so eager to learn. And at least as important as the kids were to me, so were the women who helped make it happen. And I really wanted to provide a place for women in Egypt to be able to live their life, to be able to live their passions, and that they didn't need me there in order to make that happen. So we started interviewing teachers, and they were all women, and I had maybe 50 resumes in my hand. And the first 5 lines of all the resumes were exactly the same. Line number 1, their name. Line number 2, their marital status. Line number 3, if they weren't married, when were they planning on getting married? Line number 4, how many kids did they have, and what were their ages? And line number 5, what were their future plans on having children? Yeah, I looked at our Egyptian contact, Amira, and she was as confused by my reaction as I was about these pieces of paper in front of me. She said, Michelle, how can you possibly make a decision about who you want to teach here if you don't know these things? I mean, if women have many children, that's going to affect their job. And if they're planning on having kids in the near future, that's going to affect their job too. You have to know this in order to make a decision. And I just thought it was insane. Or was it? I'm not suggesting that we all start writing our marital status and our family plans on our resumes in this country. However, it is pretty amazing to consider that these women had already jumped over what I think is the biggest hurdle. Because when Jamie and I met a few years later, those first 5 lines of their resumes were exactly the priorities that I followed. And here's the thing. It is possible to passionately follow your heart in every single area of your life. You just have to be clear, first with you, and then with those who are going to help make it happen. And then just have the courage to ask.
So like I said at the beginning, we're very much in the middle of this story. The last 6 years have been a blast. I mean, Michelle's made a couple babies. I've raised a couple teenagers. And we've taken our little business from the kitchen, like, all the way to the Wall Street Journal. We were coming out with, like, what helped us over the last handful of years that we could share with you today. And we came up with 3 things. The first is, don't buy into other people's stories. So other people, they're loud. And there's a lot of them. And they have a lot of opinions. And the thing is that they're talking about their experience about your life. And yeah, you could give them a little bit, you know, but for the most of it, it comes from in here and it comes from what you believe. So here's an example. Okay, so you have to come up with what's your definition of success? So for me, since moving to Bend, I got divorced. I don't get to see my kids every day. I've gone through my entire life savings building this business. And yet, I've discovered that the grass here, it's really green. Like, I'm serious, I've never been happier. And you guys could look at me and be like, that's crazy. And that's your opinion, like that's your story. And so I promise you this, by listening to find your greenest grass, you'll never find it by listening to other people.
And the second thing is greet your obstacles with enthusiasm and possibility. Shout things out popcorn style. You guys, what are some obstacles that have stayed in your way, that have been in your way of you following your heart in the past? Money. Relationships. Fear. Kids. Time. Yeah, by show of hands, how many of you can relate to, if not one, all of these? Right? They're just there. Obstacles happen. This is not new. This is part of the human experience, and they're going to keep coming. The gift is that you get to choose how you want to greet them. So imagine what it would be like if every single obstacle that came your way from now on, you greeted with enthusiasm, and you said, hey, obstacle, thanks for showing up. Come on in. Sit down. Would you like some tea? I'm so glad you're here. Now I don't have to think about you anymore. And then the last one is embrace your fear. And I think about a quote from Marianne Williamson, and she says that our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. So when you feel that pit in your stomach, and your chest gets tighter, and your breath becomes more shallow, and your heart starts racing, and your fear is here. It is in front of you. It's arrived. Step into it and bring it as close to you as you possibly can, and look at it right in the eyes, because it's in that moment that your fear loses all of its power, and you own your power.
Thank you.